You have been watching your yard all day. The feeders are busy in the morning, the cardinal moving through the maple at midday, the robin on the lawn pulling worms out of the wet ground in that last slow hour before the light changes. And then at some point, somewhere in that 20-minute window between dusk and full dark, it all stops. The feeders go quiet. The branches go still. The yard that was full of life an hour ago looks empty in a way that feels different from ordinary emptiness. Like something has been switched off. Most people assume the birds are just somewhere else in the neighborhood. Roosting in trees. Doing whatever birds do when no one is watching. Alive but unremarkable. What is actually happening is not unremarkable at all. What your birds are doing between the moment your yard goes quiet and the moment the first one returns at dawn involves physiological events you would find difficult to believe if you saw them from the inside. Hidden behaviors are so specific and so deliberate that calling them just sleeping is like calling migration just flying south. Technically accurate. Completely misleading about what is actually occurring. Welcome back to Backyard Bird Stories. Subscribe before you leave because tonight we are going into the dark. Into the hours your birds spend doing things you have never seen. Into the biology and the behavior and the extraordinary quiet machinery of a wild bird surviving the night. Stay until the end because the final section covers something that is happening directly above your house on certain nights this spring, and when you understand the scale of it, it will change the way you look at the dark sky over your own neighborhood forever. Number 1, where your birds actually go when the light leaves. Not where you imagine. And not the same place for every bird. The northern cardinal gives you one of the clearest answers because cardinals are faithful to their roost in a way that, once you know it, makes you wonder how many times you have walked past a cardinal sleeping in your own yard without knowing it. In the hour before sunset, a male cardinal moves. He leaves whatever part of the yard he has been using through the day and pushes into the densest vegetation he can find. Not for warmth primarily. For invisibility. A sleeping bird is a bird that cannot respond to a threat, and a cardinal pressed deep into a thick holly bush or a dense tangle of evergreen shrub is as close to invisible as a bright red bird can make itself in a temperate yard. He will use the same roost site night after night for weeks at a time. If you have a holly, a boxwood, a pyracantha hedge, or any tangle of dense native shrubs in your yard, there is a reasonable chance a cardinal has been sleeping inside it every night this winter without you knowing. The chickadee does something different. Something that, when you understand what it actually involves at a physiological level, makes you look at that small bird at your feeder in the morning with something that feels close to astonishment. On cold nights, a black-capped chickadee enters what researchers call regulated hypothermia. The bird deliberately lowers its own body temperature. Not slightly. By as much as 22 degrees Fahrenheit below its normal daytime temperature. Its metabolism slows. Its heart rate drops. It is not sleeping in the way we mean when we use that word. It is performing a controlled shutdown. Pulling its body back to the edge of something that would be dangerous in any other animal, and doing it on purpose, with precision, every single night, to make it through until morning. A chickadee weighs about 11 grams. That is roughly the weight of 2 pennies. On a bitter January night in the northern United States, the energy reserves of that tiny bird are so slim that without regulated hypothermia, it might not survive to sunrise. With it, it does. Night after night. Through temperatures that would kill an unprotected animal its size within hours. Where the chickadee sleeps matters too. It finds a cavity. An old woodpecker hole in a dead limb. A gap in rough tree bark. A nest box. It goes inside. The walls of the cavity trap the warmth of its body, reduce heat loss, and give it the margin of metabolic safety it needs to make it through. Your nest boxes are not just breeding infrastructure in spring. They are survival infrastructure every single night in winter. The chickadee sleeping in the woodpecker hole in your oak right now is not resting. It is running a piece of physiological engineering so precise that researchers who study it are still working out all the mechanisms. Number 2, the communal roost and the species you would never expect to find in one. Some of the most surprising nighttime behavior in your yard involves birds that, during the day, want nothing to do with each other. The eastern bluebird is among the most striking examples of this. In the breeding season, the male bluebird is territorial in a way that feels almost personal. He will challenge other males aggressively, defend his nest box, and keep competitors at a distance. The social rules of the bluebird world in spring and summer are clear and firmly maintained. In winter, those rules are entirely suspended. On a cold winter night, that same bluebird will squeeze into a nest box with up to a dozen other bluebirds and sleep pressed against them, sharing body heat, in a cavity barely large enough for a single bird to fit comfortably. Researchers have documented nest boxes in the eastern United States that contain 12, 13, 15 bluebirds on a single cold night. Birds that during the day would not willingly perch within 30 feet of each other, sharing 4 inches of space in the dark without apparent conflict. The calculation they have made is simple and absolute. Shared body heat means survival. The social boundaries of the breeding season exist to protect a nesting resource. There is no nesting resource in January. It is only cold. And against cold, pressed together in the dark, they survive it. The Carolina wren does something similar, though with less dramatic numbers. Wrens are intensely territorial birds. Their song in spring is a declaration of ownership that is hard to mistake for anything else. And yet on the coldest nights of winter, Carolina wrens in the northern parts of their range will sometimes share roost cavities, suspending the ordinary rules of their social world in the face of the one rule that supersedes all others. What this tells you about the physical structures in your yard is this. Every nest box you have mounted and maintained, every thick native shrub you have let grow dense, every evergreen you have not trimmed back in autumn, these are not decorative. On the worst nights of winter, they are the structures that determine which birds are in your yard when the light comes back in the morning and which are not. Number 3, how a bird sleeps without fully sleeping. The concept of being fully asleep, the way a human is unconscious through the night, does not apply to a wild bird the way you might imagine. Many birds sleep through a mechanism researchers call unihemispheric slow-wave sleep. One hemisphere of the brain enters a sleep state. The other remains active. Alert. Processing incoming information from the environment. The eye connected to the sleeping hemisphere closes. The eye connected to the waking hemisphere stays open, scanning. The two hemispheres swap periodically so that both sides get the rest they need, but the bird is never fully unconscious the way a sleeping human is. It is always, at some level, monitoring. Cornell lab researchers studying mallard ducks documented this pattern clearly. Ducks sleeping in a line at the edge of a group kept the outward-facing eye open, monitoring the perimeter, while ducks in the center of the group slept with both eyes closed. The vigilance was distributed across the flock. The birds on the edges were running a different sleep state than the birds in the middle, because their position required it. Your yard at midnight is not the empty, switched-off space it appears to be from your window. Every cavity roost, every dense shrub, every thick inner branch of an evergreen holds a bird in that half-awake state. Monitoring. The snap of a branch registers. The scrape of a claw on bark registers. The sound of the great horned owl calling from the oak at 10 o'clock registers in every roosting bird within earshot, even the ones you cannot see. The alarm call of a robin flushed by a cat at midnight travels through the dark to sleeping chickadees nearby. There is a sensory network running through your yard all night long, operating through animals you cannot see, in a state of awareness you would find difficult to fully imagine. The yard is not empty. It is full and quiet and paying close attention to every sound you make when you step outside after dark. Number 4, the birds in your yard who are not in your yard tonight. Not every species that uses your yard through the year is there at night. Some of them are somewhere else entirely. Somewhere that would take your breath away if you could see it. Twice a year, the night sky above your house fills with birds. On peak migration nights in late April and early May, and again in September and October, the number of individual birds crossing over a single point in the eastern United States in a single night can reach into the millions. These are not exotic species from distant countries. These are your birds. The wood thrush that nested in your yard last summer, the one whose evening song you heard from your porch, left in October and has been in Central America since. Right now, tonight, it is flying north in the dark above your house. The ruby-throated hummingbird that will appear at your feeder in May crossed the Gulf of Mexico last night in a single non-stop flight of more than 500 miles. It navigated by stars and by magnetic field, burning fat reserves at a rate equivalent, proportionally, to a person running back-to-back marathons without stopping. It left the Yucatan coast in the dark, alone, and arrived somewhere along the Gulf Coast this morning and has been moving north through the day. Tonight it will fly again. Birdcast, the Cornell Lab's free real-time migration monitoring system, tracks this movement using National Weather Service radar. On a peak migration night, the radar image of the eastern United States shows what looks like an enormous weather system building and moving north across the entire continent. Not rain. Not clouds. Birds. The biological mass of a migration event is large enough to return radar signals that meteorologists have had to learn to identify and filter out. Your neighborhood sits under this movement and you cannot see it without tools because it happens above the altitude where you can distinguish individual animals in the dark. This is happening above your house tonight and on many nights this spring. It has been happening above your house every spring and fall of your life. You have been sleeping beneath it without knowing what it was. Number 5, what this changes about the ordinary morning. Take a moment with this. Not as a fact to log and move on from. As something to actually sit with. Tomorrow morning, your yard will come back to life the way it always does. The cardinal will be at the feeder by first light. The chickadee will work through the maple from branch to branch the way it always does. The robin will be on the lawn before you have finished your first cup of coffee. What you are watching when that happens is not ordinary. What came before it is not ordinary. The cardinal spent the night in the holly bush or the dense shrub at the back of the yard, invisible, his bright red coloring absorbed into the dark, his body a few degrees warmer than the air around him because he found the right cover and used it. The chickadee spent the night with its temperature dropped almost to the physiological edge, its heart rate reduced, its metabolism pulled back to the bare minimum, in the woodpecker hole in the oak, the walls of the cavity holding enough warmth to keep it alive until this morning. Above your house last night, birds were moving. Thousands of them on an ordinary night. Millions on a peak migration night. Moving north through the dark by mechanisms your eyes have no way to perceive. And all of it, every bit of this that happened in the dark while you were asleep, happened partly because of what you built in the light. The feeders that gave a migrant thrush enough fuel to keep moving. The nest boxes that gave the bluebirds a place to press together against the cold. You built something in a world that continues operating through the hours you cannot see. The birds have been living in those hours fully. Every morning when they come back to your yard, they are returning from something. From a night that involved more precision and more peril and more quiet biological ingenuity than most people ever learned to imagine. Now you know what they are returning from. The next time your yard goes quiet at dusk. The next time the feeders go empty and the branches go still and the light drops below the horizon and the yard feels like it has been abandoned. It has not been abandoned. The birds have moved into the part of their lives that has always been there, that has always been happening. That just happens in the dark. Tell me in the comments. Has anything ever surprised you about your yard after dark? A sound you couldn't place. Something moving through the yard later than you expected. A bird singing in the middle of the night.